Expo. Sorry. It's okay.
Okay, there we go. You may begin.
Thanks. I'm Heather Brandt. I'm a resident. I just wanted to bring to your attention, and this all sort of happened over really a lot today, but over the last couple of weeks. I have an elderly parent who lives here in Longmont, and I started the process of figuring out, what does the big picture look like as we go down the line with aging in place or having to be in a independent living, not anything with assisted. But I started off digging around on websites, and I really am here just as an offer of, a little bit of frustration, but also I couldn't navigate any site to find out any information about affordable senior housing in the city of Longmont. Nothing. Of course, I called the senior center, make an appointment with a counselor at the senior center just to find out information from my dad. It was a 1-month wait for a phone meeting. 1 month. There's 3 counselors there. Would be a lucky guess for a senior in our city if they attended the senior center. The only reason I knew to call the senior center is because my dad goes there and plays pool, and I'm familiar with the senior center. My parents volunteered there for years. I have called the Longmont Housing Authority and left messages over the past month, never to be called back. I called Molly today. I know you're sick. I did leave you a message today. Never heard back, which I understand. I didn't expect a turnaround. But there is something broken in the system for seniors to be able to access where they find out about all of these facilities that we have throughout the city that we funded. We funded the Lodge, Hearthstone, all of that, or all the ones that we have funded as a city, but there's no way for seniors to find the information where to go. You go on the Housing Authority website, this is the website, announcements, you can't even get a full screen. This is cut off. This announcement right here says that the waiting list for senior housing opened up. The counselors at the senior center have no idea when they open up because they say that the housing authority doesn't tell them when it opens up. You have AMI written all over the place. No explanation of what an AMI is. How is a senior supposed to know what AMI is? There is no place that says where you qualify or don't qualify for housing. You also go to the city website to find out when when the housing authority meeting is. And when you go to when the housing authority meeting is on the city website, it says 6 o'clock. You open up the agenda, it says 8 o'clock. But then there's a 7 o'clock council meeting. It's just a very, very convoluted system that my dad could never, he cannot pay his Longmont dairy milk bill without guidance on a website. This is a broken system. It's not serving the seniors. I know my time's up. But I wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, and I know it's a little loosey-goosey, but this was my experience today.
Thank you.
Fair? Okay.
I'll give you a call back tomorrow.
That's fine. Thank you so much for listening to my
Get the phone number.
my late night. Right.
I'll find out.
What is the phone number that you were calling when you called the housing authority?
I called the main number, I called Quincy, the list goes on with people I left messages for, never to get a call back.
Because it got published.
Senior center should be in touch with housing.
Yeah.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other? Here?
In public, but I have no comments.
I'm sorry?
No comments, she said.
No comments? Okay. So now we are moving on to old and new business. So looking at the remote participation on the 15th of April for Commissioner Popkin. So we need to make 2 motions, it looks like. So a motion to suspend by reference council rule of procedure 25.2.A.2 to allow Commissioner Popkin to participate remotely on April 15th, 2025.
I move
Okay.
And I
Okay.
For myself, yeah. I just like to get out of town and text it.
Okay, I see who you are. Okay, so any discussion on the matter? Okay, let's vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so that passes 5-0
Thank you.
with Chair Peck and Commissioner Yarborough out. And then the second motion is to allow for electronic participation by Commissioner Popkin on April 15, 2025 due to business matter that enables him to attend in person.
So moved.
Second, is this the same thing? or-
No, one is to allow you to, well,
One allows you to be absent the end of your lunch break.
it allows you to
Oh,
suspend or,
okay.
yes,
Got it.
suspend our
Right,
rules of
second.
procedure, and then, yeah, so we're suspending our rules, and now we're allowing you to participate.
Excellent.
Okay, so all those in favor?
I move.
Oh, I thought she already
Oh,
did
did you
it, you
move?
seconded.
I seconded.
On the
Commissioner,
second?
sorry,
Second.
yeah, so Commissioner Christ moved the item, and, yes, well, we'll move Councilmember Rodriguez to second. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and opposed? So that passes 5-0 with Commissioner Yarborough and Chair Peck out. Now we're moving on to resolution, item B, resolution LHA 2025-04, approve HCD of administrative plan for the presentation.
Unmute Tracy.
This is a yearly thing that we go through. It's our voucher admin plan, and it goes over the federal regulations that we need to follow. Plus, it also goes through, sorry, my laptop thing is running out of batteries. It also goes through the policies that the Housing Authority can make. There's certain places where we can set a policy. And so this year, basically the only changes that are happening is because of HOTMA. And that Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act that was supposed to go into effect last year. And they pulled it. And now it's due to a new system, computer system, that they need to get up before we can transfer over to the HOTMA new rules. And that system isn't approved. So until then, we're under the old regulations. So this is written with the old regulations and then with the new regulations. So you have a part like a 6A and 6B. One would be when HOTMA goes into effect. It's going to effect in October. So if it goes into effect, then that would be our new policy. So most of the changes that are in the new policy is, like I said, it's all around HOTMA. None of our policies that we have in our 2024 admin plan are changing. Policies that we have, we can choose. One of the policies is we can choose to put preferences on people that you serve. One of our preferences is that they live or work in Longmont. So if there was, if we had other preferences, we could sure put those on. HUD allows us to do that. But those haven't changed. Those are still the same as last year. So in your packet, there is a summary of the changes for each chapter. Some changes too is federal regulation notice that we referred to in some of them. Human trafficking has been placed on the VAWA, the victims violence against women notification that we give out. So those are the highlights. If you want me to go through each chapter, I can do that. Or if you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions?
I don't know how.
Of course. Mr. Popkin.
I'm honored, thank you, Chair. I just have one question. For chapter 17, the packet says it went through an extensive rewrite. And so I was just curious if you could elaborate on like why such a, like the rest of the chapters generally seem like there were some clarifications or different sections added. Like what prompted the extensive rewrite for that chapter in particular?
So under they did a lot of changes under the for project-based vouchers. A lot of it was who we could. So if we're going to do a procurement for project-based voucher projects, how we go out to procure or notify properties that we're going to, we have vouchers to place on properties. That has changed. The number and how we calculate how many vouchers we can, or project-based vouchers we can have has changed. How we notice, how we put notice in the paper, how we determine who gets the vouchers or the project-based voucher. All of that has changed. And so that was just basically rewritten. And then it's all about regulation. It's nothing that we have the ability to make a policy.
It's just realignment with additional regulations or changed regulations.
Right.
Got it. Thank you.
Right.
Well, and you'll hear me talk about this later. And it could change again. And it's kind of what we're seeing right now in terms of how they're approaching certain situations. We're getting information that if certain emails contain certain items in the signature lines, I won't respond to you. So I think it is something over the next year that we're going to be in tune to, so just get ready. It may, later in the year, many of these rules could completely change on us.
As a city, are we scrubbing those lines?
I am having that conversation right now because basically pronouns is what we're doing. And, as we look at it, we have to ensure that we're representing our community and maximizing our ability to get revenue, and we can't put our residents at risk. And so we're learning about that right now, but you've heard us talk, language matters. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to be really in tune to that as we're interacting with different agencies.
That's some choice language, but let's go on.
Yeah, that's what we're.
So I say that because we're just constant, and I'll talk about this later. Mm-hmm. Based on we raised the flag. Mm-hmm. I'm going to lower the flag, mm-hmm. but there's still a potential we could raise the flag on the last item that was over.
That's what the mayor of Washington was. DC was.
What was that?
That's what the mayor of Washington, DC was doing. Mm-hmm. As she was doing several things, including painting out the Black Lives Matter causes.
Yep.
And they're different because their entire budget depends on the
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any other questions?
I have a curiosity. This is mostly for Tracy. Tracy, you said we're allowed a preference for if you live and work in Longmont, but we could have other preferences, and I lack the imagination. What other preferences would we have?
Oh, you can have homeless as a preference. You can
Homeless.
have,
Homes.
Interpret
trying
for
to
us.
think of elderly, disabled. You know, they, preferences that don't go against fair housing, so you can't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so those are the ones that I can think of right now, just like homeless, elderly, disabled. Let me tell you the history behind the working and living on. We found that when we'd open up our waiting list for the voucher program, we get a lot of people from out of state applying, and then since we have portability under the housing voucher program, a lot of people will come in from out of state to get it, and then they report it back to the state that they were coming from. Once they found out that we have a requirement that they stay here for a year before they're allowed to port, then they wouldn't want to come. But that would mess up our waiting list. We have to notify them and go through all of our process. So that's why we said work in Longmont, or live in Longmont with your preferences. We also, since we don't have very many family housing apartments, we will when consent comes on. But right now we only have AMN, Aspen Meadows neighborhood. So one of the things that voucher does is it kind of serves the families. And we've got a lot of disabled and elderly, you know, that's on our program. But it was basically kind of safe for the family ability in the community.
So I think this has been the night where preference has come up in multiple fashion, which
It
is
has.
kind of interesting. I think what you might hear across the three examples of preference we've talked about tonight is that preference adds a layer of complexity that in True North we absolutely, the council supported digging in on that because we expected a number of applicants and this was an extraordinary opportunity. When it comes to vouchers, there's a lot of fair housing and administrative technicality issues that play into it. So that's why when you heard earlier on the DPA program, that's something we did not add that layer in the past. It really just adds a lot of wrinkles and it's council's prerogative to ask staff to look into those things, but there's a lot of blatant pieces for that.
So just to clarify, we do have the live work preference
Yes.
currently part of that?
For vouchers.
Yes, for vouchers.
Yeah, okay, just making sure. Thank you.
So if there's no other questions or comments, can I have a motion to move resolution LHA 2025-04?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so this is moved by Commissioner Hopkins, seconded by Commissioner McCoy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so that passes 5-0 with Chair Peck and Commissioner Yarborough absent. Now we're on to the update on Aspen Meadows Senior Apartments. Flooring defect issue.
Okay, we're going to update on this. So we reported this to the Board of Commissioners last April. We've been working on this for quite some time, but the flooring that was installed at Aspen Meadows in 2020 and 2021 started failing soon after we did that large rehab project. We have been working with the general contractor, the flooring supplier, and the architect since then to figure out solutions that could work for all parties. I am happy to report that we have entered into a settlement agreement to get the flooring replaced. LHA will not bear any cost in getting the flooring replaced and fixed. It's a combination of a fix and a replacement. We are going to buy boxes, and that is our only financial input into it. So we're very happy to report that that issue is getting resolved right now. They started work yesterday, and it will be work happening throughout the building for the next probably couple of months, at least through May, because they're doing common areas first, and then 1 or 2 units a day. So here by summer, hopefully, no, that sounds too far. It's more like in late spring, we will have the flooring at Aspen Meadows replaced in certain areas and lifted up and applied in a proper fashion in other areas. They were able to do this and avoid a lawsuit or insurance claims. So,
Thank you.
Molly, are people going to have to move out of their apartments?
nope, they'll have to be out of the unit just for the day, but they will not have to spend the night out. So we've got the common area set up with places where people can hang out. We're sharing the senior services event schedule if they want to go do something. But they just have to keep busy for the day.
And they don't have to move their
No,
stuff, their furniture, or anything.
the
They just move it
contractors are
around.
going to move things around.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you. Okay. And then now the federal budget forecast.
So I'll take this. Who has a copy of this? If you don't have
We
a
need
copy,
And then
did
the rest
you get it?
I want to stretch my legs anyway.
So, thanks to Commissioner McCoy and Commissioner Yarborough when they were at National League of Cities talking to the reps about challenges that were coming forward. I think, and I'm talking to all city staff, all LHA staff when I say this, and you heard me say it a while ago, we just don't know what's going to happen. And so if you remember a few weeks ago, staff had a conversation with HUD representatives about what was potentially going to happen in terms of vouchers, voucher funding, specifically the shortfall category. So we start raising the flag in terms of what's coming forward. So this document was presented yesterday from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And so I think part of what I'm going to say is, we're going to hear and we're going to inform, but reacting, we're going to be really tactical when we do this, and we can't overreact when we get this information. So when you look at this document, it's a mixed bag. So in the continuing resolution that they put forward, so if you look at the HUD's tenant-based rental assistance, the TDRA program, they actually what was put in the continuing resolution is a $3.65 billion increase from the previous fiscal year. When you look at HUD's project-based rental assistance program, there was an $880 million increase for 24. There was an $18.4 million increase for Section 202. And then there was a $48.7 million increase from the previous year on Section 811. Then you can see when you start getting into this document, the HUD's community development funds, I think it's CDBG, there's a $3.29 billion cut. So many of these things are actually what we were worried about, improvements. But there's also areas where it's going to hurt us in different areas. But in terms of the housing authority, when you look at this, specifically I was, if you go to page, where is it? Oh yeah, we were going over this earlier. Tenant-based rental assistance, which is $3.6 billion higher, so that's kind of what we were looking at. What's interesting, when Kendra and I we were looking at the numbers in this category, we actually could see where we were getting more money. If you remember when we were looking at January and February, but I think they've built some things in where they're increasing it for the shortfall this year. So we have more to dig into this. But that being said, when we look at this, we're going to have to dig into this, but we know that they increased a lot of areas that could connect to what we're doing as a housing authority.
Because overall, that's a $1.3 billion net increase of those 5 programs, at least, even
Right.
factoring in the CDB. Is that the community development fund of CDBG, or is that just the congressional directed spending?
Well, that's so in CDBG. I think that's just a congressional directed spending because
CDBG
They actually
is
kept it
showing-
flat, so it didn't get an increase. That actually, if you look
Were
at
we counting on any professional directed spending through the
not
community development
this
fund?
year. No.
So
Yeah, there's sort of.
net, we're not,
On CDBG
It's a
side.
it's a formula based too, so
right?
you know we could potentially lose some in the formula based on populations where cities are growing. So not
That would
bad.
be relatively marginal and short
Right, not
term.
not bad as we're looking at 25.
And are these other formulas? Are these is like the TBRA, is DBRA, and some of the others? Are those formula based?
I don't know.
Like, are we expecting an increase from that inherently, or are those competitive grant programs, or what's going on with that?
So what we've kind of been told is that.
And I know this happened very.
Well,
so,
so they kind of
Yes.
sent us a deadline, and they said by January 25th, make sure you have all of your 2024 vouchers reported. Because I think what they do is they take the very last end of month December calculation to help provide the number to go for budget of what everybody needs for this year, which is why I think we're getting the increase right now. But we probably won't see a renewal until like May, so we're kind of still like on that teeter-tottering.
Yeah.
And we do know last year it wasn't just us that was in shortfall. So, you know, there were people that were in millions of dollars of shortfall. And so it's kind of like we're just kind of playing a waiting game right now until they actually send us our renewal, which will then let us know, did they grant us more funds? If so, are we still going to be in shortfall this year? Because we are in more shortfall than last.
Yeah, and I think that the difference in this is we didn't know what Congress was going to appropriate, and we found out that Congress appropriated more. So I think to Kendra's point, it's probably the numbers we were putting in that created the additional appropriation in these categories. So we have a project, we have one 202 project.
Two 202s.
Two 202s, one location, Hardstone and Lodge. So that may actually help us in the budget potentially, because they added money there too. Now, that's for this year.
What, Harold? So what falls under the HUD's Community Development Fund as far as what we're, our block grant?
That's what I would think would be the CDBG.
CDBG.
Okay.
So it's good news for this year. It doesn't mean that we're out of the woods because if you read through this, they even point out that 2026 budget is going to be a significant, who knows what's going to happen in that process. So as we were looking at this in terms of the vouchers and how we were going to approach it, we basically tiered it down to if worst case situation happened, what would we do? So the first thing that HUD recommended doing is filling out a waiver. So under HUD rules right now, if you're going to lower somebody's rent or adjust it, you have to give them 2 years notice.
It all depends on when their recert happens. So it could be anywhere from 1 to 2 years depending on their recertification.
The waiver doesn't have us do that. We can do it much more quickly. So I instructed staff to go ahead and process the waiver, but that doesn't mean we're going to act on it. It just means that it's processed in case we need it should worst case situation happen. The second piece of that is we are not re-vouchering. Right now, and re-vouchering means if somebody leaves and we have a voucher open, we're not putting someone in that voucher right now. And again, that's prepping for a cut or something happening. We were more concerned that it's going to happen now.
So you're saying we don't have to remove people later on?
We don't have to remove
We just
people.
keep it open
We
for
just
now
keep it
until we see.
open.
I think what Commissioner Yarbrough heard when because we split up, when she spoke with Negus's office, that they didn't think 2026 would be as favorable as this. And every time we talk to somebody, in fact, there was only one other issue. I brought this up at every meeting, and including the one with Crow, because he's not even our rep, and I tried to get him on this as well. And it was interesting that they were very receptive to it, but they just didn't have any real solid answers because, as you can see here, we got all these things going. But I did speak with the White House Intergovernmental Affairs for Western States, Michael there, and he's the director of it. So it was interesting. I brought it up to the deputy director as well.
Yeah.
That this is important. Hopefully they'll figure that out.
Yeah.
And
my gut tells me this isn't a red or blue issue. This is every state's facing this, so I think it's one that they're going to be harder pressed to deal with.
that's how I sold it.
Yeah, and I think if you look at what happened in the previous round, this was the point where the internal fighting started occurring because, when you look at just the number of vouchers and you look at populations, Florida and Texas has a lot of vouchers, and so in population base. So I think that's going to be in place. All that being said, though, so when we go through this, so we're not re-vouchering now, and you go, well, what's next? If there's cuts and they're deeper. The next thing that we talked about doing is, thus far we've been pretty generous in that HUD rules require you that it's basically 2 people per bedroom. If we got pushed, the next least impactful thing to do was to go back to the 2 people per bedroom. So right now,
Are we currently at 1?
well, no, right now, if it's you and a teenage child, we're authorizing 2 bedrooms. We would then shift it to where if it's you and a teenage child, we would go 1 bedroom. Because you have housing, you're just not getting individual bedrooms. That's the next least impactful approach. The next step down would be then we would evaluate reductions based on the waiver across the board to make sure that you're still paying something for an individual's housing, which means they're going to have to make the difference up on the voucher side. And then the last step is we will start removing people from the vouchers if cuts are made. So if 26 becomes a thing, I just wanted you all to know as we were heading into the what do we do in 25, we've tiered it out from least impactful to most impactful, and just know that in those situations we'll be communicating with you going, here's the number, here's what we're going to have to do to manage that based on what could potentially happen in the budget process.
Thank you.
I'll add one note that mixed up in all of this, we assigned our project-based vouchers out to Village on Main to make that development happen, and then to Ascent to make that development happen, and then also the future project, the Atwood Commons, if it is successfully getting tax credits. We satisfied our Village on Main commitment here in December. We're slated to fulfill on Ascent by January 26th. This is all not great timing for any of that, frankly. But one thing we have to do is through the rest of 25, those vouchers that we're not refilling, we have to be ready to assign those to Ascent in January as well. So that's also just an added layer that we're trying to manage and balance all the way through.
So it's a mix, good news, bad news. The good news is it didn't hit us now. The bad news is we're hearing 26 is going to be a battle. But I think we have a fairly solid plan, and when we talked about this, there was a point where it was like, well, we need to do something. Then it was like, maybe not. And I just think that's how we're going to have to approach it right now. It's moving daily on us, and I think managing how we react when we react is going to be incredibly important because you also don't want to overreact.
Question. If you have vacancies due to the lack of vouchers, would you consider lifting that up to market rate or just below market rate rentals?
So it's 2 different issues. So the vacancies, and if you're talking about a vacancy where there's not a voucher, you still have your tax credit requirements in terms of what incomes people need to have to live in those units. If it's a project-based voucher, I don't think we have a hard time filling those. and a project-based vouchers on the property, so it's two different questions.
Just thinking back to our notes from last time, didn't we talk about having a little higher rate?
Talked about mixed development where there's the possibility there'd be market rental
Yeah,
units.
so we talked about potentially a project of a mixed income project that would include some type of LIHTC, some type of deed restricted attainable, and some type of non-deed restricted units. That's different, but on these tax credit projects, you not only have your HUD requirements and your project-based voucher requirements, then you have your tax credit requirements. And in that, you can let somebody come in lower if you have a vacancy, and we've talked about that if we have vacancies that's
Lower
set to
than market rate?
lower than whatever the AMI is required on the unit. So if you have a 60% AMI unit that's been vacant for 3 months, you evaluate whether or not it makes more sense to bring someone in at 50% AMI. But you've got to be careful with that because that's what they did at Village on Main. But they were bringing 30% AMIs into 60% AMI units, and the gap was too large, and it created a financial challenge.
We're already having trouble with some of the higher AMIs in vacancies.
So we were going to tell you more because we were really heading down, oh, here it comes, and then we started seeing CR and seeing this. And so I think this is something we're just going to keep communicating to you all as we're seeing new information, but it could have been much worse.
2 questions here. One, in terms of communicating what could be worse, is there a proactive communication strategy we should be thinking about to residents or to kind of people on vouchers, like to just let them know that this could happen versus just kind of catch them off guard if it happens? I don't want to like create fear or frustration unduly, but I also don't want people to be caught off guard. If that, like, even if we're just saying this, these are the options we're considering right now, and we just need to be transparent. Like, I don't think we've probably faced this. I mean, I know I'm 2 months in here, but like, I assume we haven't faced this in the past decade or so.
I don't think we've probably seen this since the 80s in terms of what we're dealing with, but here's what we have to be careful with. Many of the people that are on vouchers, not all, but many of the people may have mental health issues and other issues, so we're going to have to manage how we communicate with folks. And I'm just telling you this, when we go to someone and we tell them we're going to terminate your voucher because of not getting the right paperwork and things like that, it spins people, and we spend a lot of time. And so what I can say is we'll think about it, but we're going to, language is going to be really important in terms of how we communicate it. And it just may be, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, and we'll be communicating with you as we know more, but understand things are changing daily, if not in a half a day right now. I don't know, we need to figure that out. I would actually work with like Lindsay or someone who's a communication specialist.
I think it could be worth thinking about if we want to say something, even if it's just the tune of like, hey, there's a lot of uncertainty, we're monitoring it right now, no impacts to you currently.
Right.
And we'll keep you posted as soon as we have more information if there's going to be any kind of change. I don't know if that's like the statement that would be how it would be received. I'll defer to the professionals in this space here, but
I think of someone who's living like at their fight or flight mode.
No, that's it.
And that you have people in these vouchers who are, you don't even know like what your end of day is going to look like. I worry that might push somebody over.
That's kind of it, and part of it depends on the property, but I think in all properties we've had this issue. Like I've literally had to go into meetings with different properties because the rumor mill is so bad, and say, unless you hear it from me, or in this case, Lauren or Quincy or Molly, do not believe anything that's coming out, because we're always fighting the rumor mill. And so,
it might be helpful to get a few little talking points, either through executive session or some other source, just to to make sure that
Yeah.
we're on the same page.
Yeah.
You know, it's a good point, and honestly, I would defer to our communication specialist, Lindsay, and that group to
I
say.
I think that's a
Yeah.
good suggestion there, and like, because even if we're not communicating anything, there's social media, there's
Right.
news, there's unnews,
Well,
there's
we're
other
at
sources of
coffee with
information.
council,
Yeah.
people coming
Like,
to
people are
us.
gonna hear rumors of something, right?
Right.
So can we be clear where we know something or what it impacts? Even if we aren't saying a ton of details or giving a timeline, right?
Yeah, it could be, at this point, nothing's changed, but there's still uncertainty, and we will communicate to you as quickly as something hits us. But yeah, let us work with our communication professionals, because that's why we hire them. And
Yeah, even a little bit of a one half pager sort of thing.
And are there
Just that we sell it
opportunities to look at other, the section 202 or the 811, especially looking at people with disabilities? So is people who are maybe, if they're losing their voucher, can we have these other options?
not this, so 202 projects are a problem.
Well, and you can't create a new 202. They don't, the programs died. This is only supporting those programs that are still out there.
And
Okay.
then Section 811 vouchers are specific vouchers that you have to apply for and be awarded. So we don't currently have any of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not us.
So we may have to look at that.
Community.
Those vouchers are very specific based on the services required.
Okay,
And they
got
come
it.
with services, so people exiting homelessness or people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
IDD.
So we don't have any dedicated funding or projects for that outside of our permanent support investment.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
On that note for homelessness though, that is where one of the biggest cuts is happening. in
Yes.
Of care.
Continuum of care programs.
One of the biggest cuts is in homelessness on continuum of care.
That is a regional, there are regional programs out there for that.
And so what we're also hearing to the point on this is the use of housing first is going away.
The term.
The term housing first is going away. And again, we're seeing it at HUD, we're seeing other jurisdictions moving away from it. There's a lot of nuance to that, but again, it's one of those pieces where language matters.
And that's going to be referred to as housing with supports,
Yeah.
which is functionally the same thing, just messaging is different.
Okay.
My other question that I had is, I'm looking at generally level programs in some of these areas, which is surprising.
Generally,
Level funded programs.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, like, is it worth? I don't know how much need we have, for instance, for like healthy homes or for a few of these others, but like, is it worth a little bit of a burst this year before the next budget cycle to try to capture that if we haven't recently? I don't know where we are in that. Just like putting out the idea of like, if these were to go away next year, would we want to try to capture one last cycle of that for something, even if we thought it was originally 2-3 years down the road or something?
Usually we'll get an email, probably around April or May timeframe, that tells us what voucher funding you can apply for. So some of these you may not be able to apply for some of these vouchers.
Sure.
It's just continued funding, but they'll let us know, hey, there's money available, you can apply for them, and then that gives us the kickstart to do it. So it will all depend on that email when we get it.
yeah, so like the healthy homes as that lead hazard control, if we did, we'd want to treat it as one time.
Sure.
Essentially, if we're looking at rehab programs and things like that.
I understand if we have a need at some point in the next 5 years, would we want to try to capture it now and bump that up a little bit? Same with, I don't know if we tap into choice neighborhoods or any of these other kind of more housing infrastructure related investments.
I will say that some of the grant programs that aren't these congressionally appropriated programs, I would say some of those are higher risk right now, where HUD isn't necessarily following through on some of the grants that they've awarded. Specifically the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program that we did not go for, but we have neighbors in the region that are left hanging a little bit right now. But that's not necessarily across the board.
Thank you for the update.
Yeah.
So now on to the interim executive director report.
Who's got development?
Keeping it pretty brief.
Okay,
Speaking
yes.
of 202 program, right now we are about ready. We have an RFP drafted to obtain financial consulting services to help us through that process. We have gotten some really good feedback from doing some outreach with those that have done 202 exits before. Some of them say that now is actually the time to try and do it because the program, who knows what's going to happen in the future, but right now it's out there. Also, we're working on putting together a pre-development budget. So in the next month or two, we're going to be sorting out what the plan is for that to make sure we have the resources to keep moving and how we're going to sort it out. So we're making strides there. Otherwise, I think I'll just pause there for the night.
And in a sense, just continuing to move forward if you haven't got, vertical now, so.
Updates on operations.
So I noticed an error in the dates on the vacancy report. It, for some reason, reset and pulled through February from the last time we pulled the report. So that's not actually the actual vacancy numbers. It's closer to 96,000. Kendra and I are going to be working, like we had discussed last month, on a better vacancy report. I don't like the way it pulls the information, especially for units that are long-standing vacant units. The way it calculates based on the dates. So we will be working on that. Haven't figured it out just yet. Still working on closing out our vacants. 4 at Aspen Meadows neighborhood, 3 tax credit, 1 PPV. Working on those. Quincy's actually been helping out with a lot of these, calling all the people on the wait list, trying to hustle and get people in. What we're finding is a lot of people are not responding at all, or they're over income, especially at Aspen Meadows neighborhood. We've got a lot of over income people, so that they end up not qualifying. For Aspen Meadows Senior, we have 4 vacants. We're not actively going to try to fill those right now because the contractors are going to use the vacants to stage while they work in the common areas, just to prevent more hazards in those areas. We can tell them to stay out of the way and not walk over into the areas being worked on, but people somehow end up in there. So want to reduce the hazards.
They're not even children.
And so having those units available, and then they immediately will turn those units first. It's actually working out nicely because they can sort of trial and error on timing and some of the issues that we might have to solve for in those vacant units, and it's faster. Speaking of the rumor mill, we had 2 tenant meetings last week, and in the second tenant meeting, by the time I made it downstairs to the first floor, someone had already told me, "Oh, I heard we're not allowed to leave our units at all when they're working on the hallways."
That's the opposite.
Right, and we were like, "No, you can leave your unit." We just said, try to not schedule stuff that day if possible, and be careful when you leave. So. I mean, just from one floor to the next.
Wow.
Yeah, that rumor really just sets a new floor.
Yeah.
Pun intended. Fall River, 6 vacants, and Spring Creek as well. Again, a lot of these people are moving out as we fill them. So it looks like it's the same units, and it's not. There's constant turnover. Hearthstone.
That's good, right? But it's like people are filling the vacancies. And that's
but then 2 more become vacant.
Yeah, no, I mean not like
Yeah. Hearthstone has 3. Those should fill up quickly. I believe one of those is an unfortunate eviction due to passing, which we've talked about in the past. So that just went to our attorney, so that one will continue to be vacant for like another 30 to 45 days. The lodge is fully occupied. Suites, we have just 1 vacancy, which is an LHA one, so happy to report that issue that we had consistently with getting units filled at the suites is no longer an issue. Village on Main, we have 2 vacant, and really those vacancies originally were PBVs, and we have transferred some residents to those PBVs under the reasonable accommodation process. So now we just have 2 tax credit vacancies, which will fill quickly because they're 30% units. And then Briarwood, we have 2 vacancies that we're working on as well. And then the suites, our down unit there, which was meth, is anticipated to be completed on the 24th. So we will have that unit back up and running very soon, which is great.
Any questions?
Just so you know, the thing that's I'm getting a little anxious about is inflation. So, you know, you all got to experience the elevator issue when we couldn't get the motor and we waited for the motor and we got it. It wouldn't shock me to see like significant maintenance issues and things like that, those different financial issues, simply because of potentially where inflation's heading. So we're going to have to watch the budget really close on a lot of these things. And, you know, if we end up having a meth unit, who knows what that's going to look like in 3 to 6 months if inflation really bears down on us and what it's going to cost to clean those units. So that's something that they will do. You know, they're doing a great job. If you notice, they're handling the operation reports now, thinking at a different level. And it's been good for us, it's good for me because I can look at different things. But just know that that's something that getting anxious and concerned.
Okay, property updates.
I'm happy to report that the landscaping at Spring Creek and Fall River is much better than it used to be. The rocks have all been moved. If nothing else, put that on my tombstone. Because it has been like the bane of my existence. So all the rocks have been distributed where they need to be out of the parking lots. Our maintenance team, in tandem with the landscape contractor that we have been doing beautification projects. And then they're also doing a lot of wood chips. What is that called? Mulch. Thank you. Mulch where needed, where it's worn down or blown away, and so yes, it's much nicer. We've also seen forestry has been replanting trees that were cut down previously, or whether it was for disease or anything else. All along Hearthstone and Lodge, they've replaced those trees, and then also at around Fall River and Spring Creek, there were a few trees that needed to be replaced in the spring. So. Getting some good movement there. Otherwise, the properties are kind of just doing their thing. We're having our quarterly coffee and conversations. So far, that's been well received. And then we do the monthly at Sweets and Zinnian. Just kind of the population, we like to stay in contact with them. Everything's been going pretty good. Anything?
Nope.
Okay.
And not that like Zinnia, we don't always talk about Zinnia a lot just because we don't own it, but we property manage due to what happened with the elevator. We actually purchased a spare motor to have on hand.
Okay.
When the request first came out, I was like, why would we buy that? And then Village on Main happened, and I said,
okay.
here's what we experienced at this property. Do you want to do this? And we would get reimbursed for the warranty from the contractor. So, you know, we're always learning.
Yeah.
And always shifting gears.
Thank you. Public health and safety updates.
I have that from Sarah. Sarah wasn't able to make it tonight, so she sent me an update. Village on Main recently had a community meeting with the Assistant Fire Chief and Fire Marshal Michelle Goldman, and that went well a couple weeks ago. She was able to clear up a lot of myths about what to do in an emergency, what to expect, where to go, evacuation plans, and then calls for service. Suites had 9, Aspen Meadows Neighborhood had 0, Aspen Meadows Senior 4, 2 were welfare checks, 1 at the Lodge, none at the Hearthstone. Village on Main had 3, 1 was a trespassing unhoused person sleeping in the entrance, and 2 were non-property related, mostly there was a person screaming at the bus stop next door, like, on the city sidewalk. Briarwood 0, Fall River 0, and Spring Creek 1. Zinnia had 22, 6 of which were welfare checks. We have had a lot happening at Zinnia, but we just expect that. So.
Isn't that because you said it's partially a function of moving everybody in at once, kind of?
We're still in the early stages of settling, people getting used to living in community, having neighbors. And I think just the reality for a lot of people, there's still some people who struggle to open a bank account, figure out their social security. So the All Roads staff and our staff work really closely together to do what we can. But you know, it's a difficult situation for some people, and we try our best to manage that and provide all those resources. I think if we didn't have what is it called? Housing with supports model. Mm-hmm. If we didn't have the supports part, it'd be much harder. So I'm really grateful for the partnership. We have weekly meetings with ownership, voucher team, and the All Roads team for case management. Like at least 3 a week.
And as you move more people in and people transition out, I mean, you know, it becomes more staggered. Do you anticipate then that those calls for service might be reduced as people get settled?
I think so. With every move-in and new personalities coming into a community, there's always going to be a blip, and then it will restabilize. I think a lot of our calls for service, again, too, which Sarah talked about last month, registered sex offenders have to register consistently, and those end up as calls for service. So some of those might actually be for our service.
Okay. That's good to know.
Whenever they make contact, they mark that as a call for service. So that might artificially increase our numbers for that property. But just like we saw with the suites, I think we'll see a decrease. We also got word from All Roads and the voucher management team that we are only pulling from the local case conferencing for 6 months. We're getting a reprieve for 1 month, which we suspect will help because that's exactly what we did at the suites. And then we made it permanent. I don't know if that will happen with Elements 2 properties, but we're going to kind of see what happens over the next 6 months with the referral process, success of clients. Due to the ties to Longmont, that's what we, I don't want to say the word assume, that's what we attribute the success of suites to that.
With added services.
Yeah, the services, the connection to Longmont, the fact that the people want to live in Longmont, this is their home. Yeah. And they have that local connection, they're more likely to be successful.
Yeah, and I think when you pull out of the it's Boulder County list, correct?
Yeah, the
coordinated entry list, they're already being supported before they get housed. So you have our lead team, our core team, you know, you have different agencies that are already engaged with individuals. So to Lauren's point, what we saw at the suites was it made a tremendous difference. Doesn't mean it completely goes away, it just made a difference. But to set expectations, it took us about 2.5 years to really make progress at the suites from when we first engaged to when we really started seeing a consistent reduction in calls for service, and even then it would flare up on us. And so it's a multi-pronged approach. But to their point, we've got the All Roads group there. We have on the other side 2 clinicians. We're hiring the 3rd clinician, or they may have hired the 3rd clinician. We have Recovery Cafe helping us. It's still not enough in many ways in what we're needing to do. So, permanent supportive housing generally is, I would probably, if we ever did it again, say we need to double the staff before we put in this model in the budget. It's just, it's the amount of services that you have to be there consistently providing the significant.
say that welfare checks count as a call for service? Is there any way to disaggregate that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can. Sarah just usually,
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Kinda
So
links
it,
together.
so you already have it disaggregated. Okay,
Yes.
that's good. And I was just wondering because sometimes that could send a different perception or communicate that there's more of an issue than there is, and acknowledge that. So if we already have that data, great.
yeah.
Yeah, that's part of what I want on my dashboard, just community-wide, is to just identify certain types of calls for service that are more impactful to neighborhoods and communities, and take out welfare checks because,
Those are important, but they're routine, right?
well, they are, and it's also what are you looking at? You
Yeah.
know, so there may be times I want welfare checks in when I think about the work we're doing with the caring communities or whatever we call
Sure.
it. You know, I want to know that because that's tangible to that conversation. But if you're looking at safety issues and other things, then what you're going to want to look at is, you know, DVs, assaults, those types of things. And so Zach and I have been talking about how to cut the just police data as a whole,
Yeah.
so we can then start getting a better look at it. And then what we're doing with strategic integration, they're calling it, they did call it Harold's map of everything. That'll let me start targeting different variables, so I can start trying to see consistencies throughout the community and actually turn it into more of a leading forecast versus us always reacting. Maybe we can start seeing things that'll let us be a little bit more proactive before we see a neighbor return or something like that. That'll all be data that then they can use as well, but it'll be more focused on the properties.
Yeah, and just for your own knowledge, how they work is we get like a very high-level report every day of the calls for service that came in the day before. And Sarah follows that up with an email, depending on the property, where it's at, with details from the call logs. If there's follow-up needed, she copies Quincy and the property manager. At the suites, she'll copy the clinicians. And that way, everyone is informed of like, if someone's having a crisis, we follow up. If someone experienced domestic violence, we're following up because we have an obligation as a landlord. And so we track all of that. Welfare checks. Sometimes it's core lead, just following up on a call, just checking in on someone that they already are working with. So it's ranges from like no reaction needed to we have a problem. We need to convene.
And to give you a perspective, they're handling that, when we first started, that was like our daily lives. At least my life, before Lauren and Quincy, that was our daily life. They're handling probably 98% of it now, and it's really 2 to 5% depending on the time.
And even the property managers are doing
and
it.
that will elevate itself to where it takes all of us. And so it's a significant change. I mean, I can't underscore how much of a change it's been, and it's been good because my expectation then is we're all elevating into our true roles that we need to be in. There is occasion where you have a guy hit another guy over the head, where then the calls start with a gun, and then we're all kind of coming in. But that's rare.
That's fair. Yeah, far and few.
Yeah. Versus when we first took it over, I think we were flying out of the building about 2 to 3 times a week. So.
Thank you. Now we're down to commissioner comments. Okay, we can have a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second. Okay, so motion's been made by Commissioner McCoy, seconded by Commissioner Chris. To adjourn, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that passes 5-0. And we are